What's going on, guys? Welcome back to NolanTCG, and we are back here today for another deck profile, and this time, it's for Dragonmaid. And I know there was a Dragonmaid list a few weeks ago, but this is the list that I took to YCS. So this was my European YCS list. Overall, I built the deck this way because it handles stuff like Salamangreat and stuff like Tri-Brigade very well, and I kind of figured they'd be predominant. Annoyingly, I didn't play any of them all in the entire of day one, so that sucked quite a lot. Overall, the deck has a very good rogue matchup, yet I lost to... I lost to the cards my opponent had, not to my opponent's decks. So my three losses were to... what were they? It was Fish, so essentially Zeus Toad control. I just lost to him having, like, 2 hand traps every turn. My second loss was to Striker. He opened very, very well, both games. So I lost that one. And then my third loss was to... It was Manju. And both games for that, he opened the exact 3 cards that beat my board. So I set up, like, almost my best possible board. So it was 3 live back row, a decent card in hand. I believe the card in hand may well have even been Amazement Arlecchino. And then I had the Heretic Seal on board. He had Kaiju, Ash, Denko Sekka. All 3 games. And I was just like, oh, cool. Awesome. This is fun times. But before we get started on this one, as always, please remember to drop down below and hit that subscribe button if you are new here, because we are always happy to have new people on the channel. And let's get on into the deck profile for this one. Before we do get started on this one, though, it is brought to you, of course, by yourplaymat.com, who got us our beautiful NolanTCG extra deck sleeves. These are available on yourplaymat.com, as well as you can get custom sleeves and custom playmats, so whatever you need for the current format. There is an affiliate link in the description down below that does get you a little bit of a discount on your order. Also, enter the code NOLAN10YP for 10% off your order. Also kicks back a little bit to the channel, so everything will be very much appreciated. If you're shopping there, you're getting custom sleeves, custom playmats done. Make sure to enter our code at checkout. But let's get on into this deck profile. Okay, so starting us off, we of course have the centerpiece of the deck, the playset of Starlight Rare Chamber Dragonmaid. Please do hit the subscribe button and watch this video 5 times so I can afford to pay for these. Following that up, we have 3 copies of Parlor. Again, just your standard Foolish Burial Dump. I'm still playing the same ratio as always. If you watch all my Dragonmaid lists, this is the same list. This is the same standard ratio for my maids. So I played 3 Chamber, 3 Parlor, 1 Kitchen, 1 Nurse. In testing on online simulators, this ratio is not enough. Ultimately, I don't know if it's the way the algorithms and stuff, shuffle the decks and it's randomized. It is pretty often you'll find yourself, without a normal summon in your hand. That shouldn't happen, statistically. I'll find if I'm playing a best of 3, one of those 3 games I will always have a hand of no normal summon. It's really annoying. In person, though, this deck handles very, very well. That consistency thing isn't really a massive issue. It will happen from time to time. But as you're playing Control, you can typically last to about turn 5 anyway. Just being able to stall your opponent until you can get a normal summon. Hopefully it's not Nurse, but hopefully it's not Kitchen as well. Kitchen's not too good. But yeah, ultimately, the 8 is still what I'm playing. If I do look into playing a combo variant, I may well cut the Kitchen altogether. If I'm going to be throwing in stuff like Dragoonity and stuff like the Dragon Link packages. Following that up, we do have our still standard 3 ratio of the bigs. So playing 1 Lorpa, 1 Tinnick, 1 Urns. You have the Negation, you have the Honest, you have the Monster Reborn. I did play against Trains and this stall game, because my opponent made Mega Claw. I know he made the big burn dude. It's the big one that goes up to 6k, but he didn't use the effect, because he didn't want to lock himself in only attacking with that, and he declared attack. I went, started battle phase, switched into a Lorpa, and he declared attack, and I was like, okay, damage calc, Tinnick, and then I just won the game from there. After this is the next, this is probably the first big change. We played 2 copies of Phantasme, over playing the what I would normally play in the one that summons with 2800 defense, draws a card when it's linked. I've struck a complete blank, but that's what we switched out the Phantasme for. Given that stuff like Salamangreat's more prevalent in the format, you're always going to get the draw off the Phantasme, as well as it's pretty much every deck you're going to get a draw off this card at the moment, and it's really, really good because of that. Then we get into our Administrator package, so we're still playing the 2 copies of Arlecchino. This card came in clutch every time I saw it. It was just very, very good. Then we get into our hand traps. So I decided to go with 3 Ghost Spell in the main, and then 2 copies of Ash Blossom. The 2 copies of Ash were a last second addition. I decided to take out 2 trap cards and replace it with the Ash Blossoms, just because I felt as though the Ash would give me more versatility going first or second. overall, gave me a lot of like hand trap options because I'm playing Imperm later in the list, and I felt like it was really, really good. I always had a disruption for something my opponent was doing. Then we get into our spells. 3 copies of Dragonmaid Hospitality. Again, just your standard extender, so you kind of want to see this when you can see it. If you don't have to search it, it's always good. Then after that, we did cut down, because it was a major event, to 1 copy of Changeover. I was initially really worried that the 1 Changeover would eventually bite me in the ass, given that in the morning of the event, they announced that we were going to be playing with the updated rules, meaning that you can, like, you can Crow a Benten, and then the Benten wouldn't resolve. So I kind of figured Crow would be a lot more prevalent. Ultimately, a lot of people didn't get time to change their list from what I was kind of picking up, so it wasn't super massive. Then we get into the next lot, so we're playing 3 copies of Prosperity still, because this is a Prosperity build. I am considering actually switching it to the Extrav, or maybe even playing a 3-2 ratio and Extrav to Prosp, just to give this deck as much consistency as possible. Overall, drawing 2 cards is good, and I don't think you are... It's rare that you're going to banish all of your fusions. It will happen from time to time, but that's something you just got to kind of learn. So I might consider switching those out. Then for our last 2 spell cards, we just had a power spell in Fartpi's Feather Duster. The other one's Called by the Grave. These were the 2 cards that we played as like our kind of versatile options. This was for back row decks, of course, and this was for hand traps. Always good. Then we get into our trap lineup. Still 3 copies of Tidying. Like, you would never cut this down to less, so it's just pretty self-explanatory. If you know Dragonmaids, this is the best card. Then we have Different Dimension Ground. So the reason why I played Different Dimension Ground is because against stuff like Tri-Brigade, if they didn't hard draw the trap card, it would like really make their day bad. It would also like stop them from being able to get them into graveyard to trigger their effects to search. It really means they have to open very well. Against Salamane Great, it's again another auto win if you're going first, because they just can't play. And with Prankids as well, because the Prankids cards don't trigger if they don't go to graveyard. So that was 3 decks where I figured this was just an auto win against. Other decks as well, it was quite good. However, ultimately I didn't play a lot of meta, so I would have liked to have played a lot more meta. Granted that it was a YCS, you are going to see Rogue, and I saw a lot more Rogue than I was expecting to. Then we get into our next of our traps. So I'm playing 3 Imperm. With the Amazement package, I kind of wanted to have that Imperm Faker combo of being able to go Imperm and then drop a Arlecchino after that, which overall, I think come up like once or twice. A lot of the times as well, I had the Phantasme as well, and I was like, this is going to conflict. And then I just had to like wait and then drop the Imperm. Then if they then summon the Arlecchino, get the book, and if they kept playing into Link monsters, like I have extenders, then I just slapped in the Phantasme, get the cards I needed to then break their board in the next turn. And then the last off, rounding out the main deck, it's 2 copies of Amaze Attraction Horror House to go with the Arlecchino. It's just your standard Book of Moon. Okay, now we get into the extra deck, and of course, it is the 3 copies of Shiu. Extra deck is still pretty standard. It's 3 copies of Shiu for the negation, and 3 copies of House because it's what you're going to switch into. Probably the biggest call that I made was 2 copies of Entis. So the reason why I played this was because I was a little bit worried about my matchup with Invoked Shaddoll. I really wanted to play 2 Entis, so if they attempted to resolve a Maximus, I could threaten both the Macabre and the Meltdowns. Because I was playing Ghost Spell in the main deck, I wanted to have the ability to go after both of them, because then I would, of course, want to be able to bell the Invocation if they activate it later on, if that's the way they're kind of playing. No, sorry, I wanted to be able to Invocation the Schism. Invocation the Schism. Ghost Spell the Schism, because they can't Ghost Spell the Schism under the Meltdown, so I wanted to make sure that Meltdown was always gone. Ultimately, my matchups against Invoked Shaddoll were pretty straightforward, like pretty easy wins. I really, really think I've mastered my matchup against that deck. Sorry, Jake. But yeah, I don't feel threatened by that deck at all with this list. So that's something you can keep in mind. Then we go into our Link monsters. We've got 3 copies of Heretic Seal, Heavenly Spheres, of course. You're playing a list that banishes cards from your extra deck, so you want to max out on the best cards as possible. Then we played 1 copy of Pisty and 1 copy of Striker for our transitional Link 1s. 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix. This came up once to out of Floodgate, because if you're under there can be only 1. A Dragon plus Arlecchino can go into Phoenix, and then the Phoenix can pop, which is good times. And now's the part when I definitely check to make sure I'm not talking out of my ass, and I check to make sure Arlecchino is a Psychic. It is cool. Yeah, it's not a Feint, so you can go into Arlecchino and pop that there can be only 1, which is something that was pretty prevalent at the moment. And then, finally, the last Link monster. It's 1 copy of Borrelsword Dragon. It's just in here because if you're transitioning through Pisty, you want to kind of have something big for game. I would definitely consider playing an access code instead in the list, given that you're not having... Rare is it going to be that you're going to lock yourself into dragons as you're transitioning through. So access code could honestly probably be a better option, given that it can get those pops as well. Although a lot of the links that we're playing are darks and lights. I guess, actually, no. Logically, I think that's a good idea. That could be something I could test out in the future. Okay, so that will wrap us up here for the deck profile for this one. If you do have any recommendations or things that you will be playing in your Dragonmaid list, as always, comment them down below. Do remember that going X3 is essentially topping, so I topped the event. Big thanks to NerdFactor for pointing that out. It really helps up my self-esteem. Really, really boosts me up. But as always, I've been Ben from NolanTCG, and have a good afternoon, everybody.